Hello, and you're listening to the Book Was Better podcast, the podcast where we talk about the book of the film. I am Luke.
And I'm Jacinta.
And this week we're talking about Highlander.
Hey you, put down the popcorn and turn off the light. It's gonna be alright, my friend. In the end, take my hand. Trust me, the book was better.
There can be only one person that I trust to join me on this immortal adventure, and that is you, Jacinta.
I'm here, ready for adventure.
Are you excited about this little foray into the 80s?
Well, I would have been probably more excited before I watched the movie that this book is based on.
We were both Highlander virgins. We both watched it for the first time last night, which is amazing, especially for me with my age, not ever seeing this film in its entirety before, but there you go.
Yeah, I have felt violated by Highlander now.
It is a cult classic. It is one of those things that people love, and it has had many different incarnations throughout the years, but completely skipped me by.
Yeah, and it's an interesting film, and by interesting, I mean it's shit.
Yeah, okay, no elaboration on that.
Yeah, no, it's not a very good film. Like, I was watching it and going, I don't know what is happening here, and then about half an hour in, I'm going, I'm still not really quite sure what's happening here. And then it finished, and I went, I'm not really sure what happened there.
It's pretty ballsy in terms of the concept. Like, it's not one of those sort of basic things that baby you. There's a lot of different ideas in here. Not all of which I think are even satisfyingly explained, but we'll certainly get to that as we begin to unpack it. Also, just want to say before we get going, if people hadn't realised from our incredibly out-of-sync Highlander chorus at the beginning, this is a Skype cast as well. We are not in the same room, so who knows what will happen.
All sorts of hijinks. I'm just like flipping you birds everywhere, and you can't see it. It's magic.
Sorts of dead air for me to edit out, but there you go. Look at us go. So, do you know what? I've actually heard of this author before, because he's listed here as Gary Douglas, but when I looked into it, this is Gary Douglas Kilworth, mostly known as Gary Kilworth, who is the author of a whole lot of original work, some of which I have actually seen on library shelves. So the expectations are pretty high from Gary with two R's here, and these works include books such as The Songbirds of Pain, Princely Flower. I remember when I lost my Princely Flower. And Gaslight Geezers, which I believe is being made into a film by Guy Ritchie, or at least it should be.
Starring Jason Statham.
As the Gaslight Geezer. There you go. There's a superhero that we can all relate to. A Victorian vigilante. He's sticking up for the rights of mistreated chimney sweeps. Well, let's get straight into it, because there's certainly a lot of stuff to talk about, a lot of terms. This book, if anything needed a glossary, it is Highlander. We're going to learn about quickenings and all sorts of things as we go on here. So, shall we begin with the prologue? So it seems like a pretty smart place to start.
It does. The beginning definitely does seem like a reasonable place for us to start in this book. So, shall I go?
Yes.
Yes, good. At the end of the battle, there were two warriors left on the field. The Dark One, riding a black horse and wielding a broadsword, and the Mongol on his white stallion. Both men had been wounded many times during the melee, but still sat upright in their saddles, one at either end of the valley. Between them lay hundreds of bodies, the dead on either side.
The Dark One, a Kurgan, called to the Mongol, "There can be only one!" But whether the knight from the far Orient heard and understood was not evident from his posture or any gesture. He merely tested his curved blade at the wind, a few strokes to take the stiffness out of his arm muscles. The sword flashed incomprehensible, heliographic messages to the hills on either side. The Kurgan smiled to himself. This Mongol would be his third Immortals So already we're completely at sea here.
And, like, this isn't in the movie, is it?
No, I don't think so.
No, it starts the wrestling, yeah?
Yeah. So this
Yeah.
is sort of really setting the scene here, but already we have to deal with, like, I know what a Mongol is.
Mm-hmm. A Mongolian.
Yes. But a Kurgan? Now, come on.
No.
And then, like, immortals as well?
It's just too much. It's too much at this stage of the story.
It's a lot on my little plate. My little Peter Rabbit plate. Actually, you know my favourite... They're making a Peter Rabbit movie, and Daisy Ridley's doing a voice. And a friend who I went to high school with is working on this thing. So if he listens to this and wants to hook a brother up, that would be fantastic. Why Peter Rabbit? Why is Peter Rabbit popular? All he wanted to do was, like, steal some carrots, right?
Yeah, but, I mean, then maybe they tried for Brer Rabbit and then just went, oh, maybe a bit racist.
And look, Beatrix Potter is a rich vein to mine. I'm not against that. But you've got all sorts of, like, you know, Peter Rabbit, that's not nearly as inventive as, say, Jemima Puddle Duck or Mrs. Tiggywinkle. And you can read some of my stories about those, some of my fanfics online. But
Well, maybe Peter Rabbit's going to be like the Iron Man. You know, they'll put his movie out to test the waters, and then we'll go into the whole, what would it be, Beatrix Cinematic Universe, the BCU.
Beatrix Potter, played by Renee Zellweger, turns up with an eye patch, which was a stray bullet from Father McGregor. And she starts to assemble the team, gets Jemima Puddle Duck. But what I was really leading to is I think the best story there, and again, I've got a friend working on this, so if you're hearing this, this is your sequel, is Tom Kitten. Because Tom Kitten gets wrapped up in a pastry, like a big old kitten sausage roll. And there's this painting in the book of this little kitten head sticking out of this roll of pastry on the floor. And I'm smiling. I'm laughing just thinking about it. It's one of my favourite pictures in the world. So I do encourage everyone to Google Tom Kitten being rolled in pastry. And if you're having a down day, just have a look at that and have a chuckle. But for me, that's your blockbuster film.
Yeah, the perils of Tom Kitten.
And
I can't wait already.
And imagine all the tie-ins, like a large Tom Kitten combo, where you get a large Coke, a large popcorn, and a marzipan kitten rolled in pastry. It's just fantastic.
Or like it's one of the novelty cups and the straw comes out of his mouth.
Yeah, this little kitten just rolled in pastry going, kill me! So, anyway, the Kurgan, I'm all on it. It doesn't get wrapped in pastry in this, unfortunately. But sweat and foam flew from the mouth of the gelding, splattering on the Kurgan's hammered bronze helmet with its beast's skull crest. What's a gelding?
It's a horse with no knackers.
Crikey. That's how tough this guy is. And this is played by, what's his face? Clancy Brown. Who is just a mountain of a man and really the star of this film. And
Oh, absolutely.
I wouldn't be surprised if he bit that horse's knackers off.
Yeah, I imagine the time period that this is set in, like, I can't imagine that most people would bother with gelding their horses, but sure.
He obviously needed a snack on the way here to face the Mongol. Their heavily furred, narrow-eyed Mongol closed rapidly. The horse's lungs were creaking like worn leather, and sprigs of steam spurted from their nostrils. So, basically, the moral of the story so far, horses are disgusting.
The Kurgan let out a loud battle cry, swung back in his saddle and brought the edge of his broadsword across the grey's throat with tremendous force. The heavy blade sliced through flesh and bone, severing the horse's head. The Kurgan's horse continued to surge forwards. The broadsword followed through to impact with the Mongol's neck, divorcing head from body, a double decapitation in one stroke. The two heads, human and animal, hit the ground almost simultaneously, followed by a tangle of limbs.
Can we call it already? The book is better? I mean, fuck.
Oh, fuck yeah!
He cuts the horse's head off and its rider's head off in one stroke. That is the coolest thing ever.
The movie is already shitter for not having included this scene.
Plus, like, let's not forget the movie has a soundtrack by Queen. Can you imagine, like, Queen cranking while this guy cuts the head off a horse and its rider, and their heads, like, bounce around together on the ground?
Yep.
Holy shit. And I should say, and we should expect this from someone like Gary Kilworth, this is, it's not a badly written book. I'd actually say that, once again, it pretty much fits the criteria of being like a standalone story.
Okay.
So once he kills this guy, the quickening happens. Now, do you know what the quickening is? Are you confident enough to figure out this quickening lark?
Well, I feel like when a Highlander person kills another Highlander person, or whatever they are they Highlanders?
No, they're not, because he's specifically a Highlander, because he's the Scot, not the Okay, so let's get these terms straight, because if we figure this out with everybody now, it's going to make our job easier going forward. So the Kurgan is the bad guy, played by Clancy Brown, and he's an immortal.
Yes.
Now, our hero is Christopher Lambert, who plays Connor MacLeod, a.k.a. what does he call himself, Nash?
He's Nash in the modern day.
In the modern day. And he was a Highlander, and he's also an immortal. So when
Okay, so they're immortals.
They cannot be killed unless
their heads get chopped off.
Or you lop off the nog. So when you lop off a nog, the quickening happens.
And so I guess they're like... Are they like taking in the life force of the other dude, or is just the lightning magic is happening to them, or something?
Kind of a bit of both, I think. So all the energy and power and life force of the person you killed kind of comes streaming out of their neck and gets absorbed by you, I believe. So now you have extra power. So the gathering is when all the immortals, I guess, are coming together to fight so that there can be only one.
I guess so.
And when there is only one, the person that's left that gets the reward of all the quickenings going into their body will receive the ultimate prize. Although, and this is the prize, capital T, capital P. I'm not saying that it's toilet paper. I'm saying that it is... Well, it could be. That's the thing. You don't know what it is. And these guys don't, at this stage, even know what it is. It could be a washer-dryer combo.
Well, from the looks of the Highlander, he could probably do with that.
They don't know what it is, but they think it's worth a shot. It could be a cruise. We don't know. So, quickenings, gatherings, prize, immortals, and one particular Highlander. Speaking of which, the Highlander, Connor MacLeod, played by Christopher Lambert, who... We talked about how fucking crazy his accent is, right? I mean, how would you describe it?
Like, it kind of vaguely European is probably the nicest way that I can put it, because it travels to a lot of different countries throughout this film, I feel.
He's, but he's, like, supposed to be originally, like, a Scottish dude, right? And his Scottish accent's not, it's not stellar.
No, it's not, no.
Did you know he did not speak English when he was cast in this film?
What?
Yeah, he's, like, just learning English.
Where's he from?
Like, somewhere...
Is he French?
Yeah, I think so.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, and I hadn't realised that. So this is, like, his first English-speaking film. So, look, hats off to him.
I mean, I'll cut him some slack then.
Oh, well, yeah, not across the neck, I hope, though. Because that would not be good, considering his line of work. So, we cut to the present, which I believe it's 1985, I think. That's what I put all through the notes.
I think they mentioned 1985 in the movie. So,
the book's copyright 1986. And MacLeod, who is the Kurgan's next target, wears a dirty old raincoat while watching oily men wrestle each other.
MacLeod's restless eyes scanned the other spectators filling Madison Square Garden. As usual with such events, there was a strong smell of human sweat in the air, brought on by the close proximity of many bodies and an atmosphere of anticipation.
A whole lot of fluids in this book. I feel like I could just, wring out the pages and collect it in a vial, in a bucket.
Yeah. This opening scene was... rather jarring, I've got to say, for what I was expecting this movie to be about and how it started. Didn't really line up for me.
It is a crazy scene. It is definitely the 80s distilled. And the funny thing as well, in the book when he's watching it, the whole point of the scene is about violence. Like, he's watching the violence, and he sort of goes into his first Highlander flashback when someone's like, take his head off and stuff. And the way that the author describes the violence, there's this feeling that wrestling is real.
Okay, but it was real in the 80s, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's what I wonder. Like, did people think, in the 80s it was real? Because, I don't know, I think it's one of those things, if you watched it again, you might reconsider. So the question is, like, if you watch this scene, and I do recommend you do, does Gary Kilworth capture the 80s madness of these wrestlers? So here are a couple of highlights, and you be the judge. All four wrestlers began prancing around and making threatening gestures towards one another.
Blonde backbreaker leaned forward on the ropes, leering at the crowd, and seductively unzipped his jacket to reveal the solid chest beneath, covered in wiry hair. There were screams of delight from the spectators.
Or the woman's attention was completely taken up by the 4 mounds of blubber in front of her, pounding away at each other's bodies. Yeah, I think he does a pretty good job of summing what happens in that scene.
Yeah, was one of the dudes... Like, he looked like Andre the Giant, but he seemed too small.
Look, Andre is an actual giant, so...
Yeah.
Did he have
That's what I thought.
Did you see, like, a golden harp or a special goose?
I cannot say that I did, no.
No, well, probably not then. Mm-hmm. So, yes, all these cries of violence lead MacLeod to close his eyes, and he pictures a happier time back in Glenfinnan in Scotland in 1536. So for a little while here, we're going to go back and forth between 1985 and 1536. Like I said, there's a lot. There's a lot to take in here on your Peter Rabbit plate. And, this was a sort of happier time when they were desperately trying to kill that fucking Fraser clan.
So much murder. His cousins were ever watchful for the ambush which might come at any time on their ride back to the village. All 3 men were riding bareback, and their thick Celtic legs gripped the sides of their sturdy mounts, gently applying pressure to maintain direction. Each of them carried his claymore and tard in the right hand, while the left loosely held the reins.
Do we like that word? I like diversity in a squire, but that's a little too much for me.
I don't know what they mean by a tard. Is that like a shield of some sort?
But he's got it in the same hand as his sword. That's what worries me, is, like, what could you have? Like, in the same hand while you're carrying a sword? I guess you could have, like, a little shield strapped to your arm.
I guess so. Well, I mean, they're manly men, like, so they want a shield, but they don't want a shield that makes them look too wussy, like they want to be protected too much.
No, that's right. They're Scotsmen, after all. And Fraser's... the Frasers, they turn up, and things are a little bit more intense in the book than they are in the film. With the Fraser's shield arm thus occupied, Connor thrust with the point of his sword. The blade entered the man's cheek, just below the bone. It was not a death blow, but the other, his foot free now, ran backwards. Connor could see him sticking his tongue through the new hole in his face.
Oh.
And somewhere out there in 1985, a young George R.R. Martin started boning up. Hit the typewriter. Someone's probably... I don't know the chronology there. He's probably already written Game of Thrones by that stage. I don't fucking know.
He was probably 68 in 1985.
That's true. He was probably 1,985 in 1985. So these are Scotsmen. Fuck yeah, they speak in a great Scottish... brogue, I believe. I've put a line of dialogue here, just if you want to play a game of, is your bad Scottish accent worse than Christopher Lambert's bad Scottish accent?
Ooh, okay.
You can have multiple shots at it.
Boys, cried Dougal, just wee laddies.
Boys, cried Dougal, just wee laddies. And MacLeod...
Aye.
And MacLeod returns to his loving Kate. So, first female character to turn up. So, as always, we ask the question, is she hot? Novelizationists are usually quite concerned with that. But we don't find out. Not here, at least. We just find out that she has a thin face. So if any of you out there are wanting to be a police sketch artist at any time, we're going to get a few more details about her as the story continues. So on your pad of paper, sketch out a thin face, and you'll have more things to add as we continue. And we'll put together a picture of Kate, and you can send it in, and we'll post it on our imaginary dream diaries. Hold that thought, Marty. You've got to come back to me to 1985, when McLeod is sick of the wrestling and he heads out into the car park.
Then a man stepped out of the shadow of a pillar and stood there, regarding him silently for a moment before saying, "McLeod." He nodded. "Facile, wait." The man threw open his coat and reached inside.
To me, this sounds like McLeod's lucky day. Like, you watch men wrestle, you're sitting there, you're sweating in your dirty raincoat, you get so frustrated by it all, you leave, you get in the darkened car park, and there's a surprise little rendezvous. I think this is actually quite romantic.
And there's just all the like shiny cars, and like they're just going, "Oh, we're men and we just love cars and sweat and wrestling, and oh, how can this even get any better?"
We love the smell of each other. But it turns out it's not pork swords at the ready, it's fancy ancient swords. McLeod has a samurai sword, and the two men desperately try to lop off each other's nogs, because Facile is also one of these immortal dudes we've been talking about. But of course,
there could be only one ending. The samurai blade swept out in an arc. It seemed to gather light to itself, brilliance flooding into the blade. McLeod put all his strength behind the blow. Facile's eyes were still staring into his own as the weapon sliced the grey-haired head clean from the broad shoulders. It rolled down Facile's chest and between the open legs of McLeod, coming to rest a few feet away. The wound on the torso fountained blood, and the body crumpled as if it were boneless, hitting the ground heavily and splashing McLeod's legs with water. The shallows began to turn pink as threads of red mingled with the water.
Again, nicely written, very visceral, very evocative, and probably more so than the film, I have to say. And here we get the quickening. So here's a little bit of a description of that process to really put you in mind of what this thing feels like. Out of this darkness came the life force, the energy due to him. His right, earned by the death of Faisal. He felt the bolts of energy enter his body, was shaken by them. Pain, 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 but the pain of life, not death, they surged through him, burning through his veins, along his nerves, into his heart, his brain.
Oh, brain energy.
God, it sounds good, doesn't it? Sounds more like the fappening. Anyway, we go back to 1536, and I told you, police sketch artists, get your pencils, because we find out that Kate, she had a thin face, now add a sharp nose.
Okay. Are we sure that she's not a chicken?
Could be. Have a look at your pads, everybody. Have you drawn a chicken? Hopefully there'll be some more information that'll transform that chicken. So, who knows? But maybe he is in a relationship with the chicken. Read between the lines.
He's like Gonzo.
Well, yeah. Yeah, why not? So, he soon encounters those murderers and rapists, the Frasers, but this time with them is the Kurgan. And we get our first proper description of the magnificent Kurgan.
He was not dressed like the clansmen around him in the Fraser tartan, but in an animal skin cloak, a fur that failed to hide his giant frame. Instead of a claymore at his side, there was a huge broadsword, and on his head was a helmet made from the skull of a strange beast, which bore fangs that curved down to the corners of his black eyes.
This copy of the book that I have is got to be one of the original printings. It doesn't have a movie poster. It's got an illustration with a guy that looks vaguely like Christopher Lambert holding the sword and doing his O face. But sort of floating head in the sky style, leering at him, is the Kurgan with this weird skull on top. And it totally looks like a character from Willow. Has just walked onto the scene with the New York background behind him. Very creepy.
In the movie, the Kurgan actually looks pretty cool when he's got all that business on, but he only has it on for that one scene.
When he takes it off, he looks like Howard Stern.
He looks like shit, yeah.
Tommy Wiseau. Tommy Wiseau would be a great Kurgan in a remake.
Oh, God, imagine.
Yeah.
Ugh.
I think Tommy Wiseau is immortal as well. I think you would definitely need to decapitate the guy to stop him.
I would definitely agree with that, yes.
I also think, why would anyone want to stop him? Because let's ride that train out. So a fight begins, and I thought maybe this was a bit of unintentional comedy corner. You give it a read and tell me what you think.
Angus reached to his sock for his dirk and stabbed the Fraser in the groin.
Yeah, I have trouble picturing that choreography, but there you go. And no one's willing to fight Connor McLeod. No one's fighting back because they know something about him. He's been reserved for the Kurgans. Oh, the Kurgan leaps in. The giant man stepped forward and drove the huge sword into Connor's stomach. Connor felt the blade penetrate, and a leaden pain washed over him. That kind of pain he knew from Angus, a heavy, dull pain instead of a sharp one, was a mortal wound. Again, I like that. I like in action sequences where you don't just describe it, but you let us know what that character feels, what it feels like to have this experience, because that's what makes you invest in it. That's what makes it more sort of immediate and chilling.
But also, like, how the fuck does Angus know? How does Angus know what a mortal wound feels like as opposed to a non-mortal wound? Angus is still alive.
Oh, he might be dead at this stage. Did he survive this battle?
Oh, I don't know. But did Angus get stabbed and they had a conversation and Angus went, this is a heavy, dull pain.
Yeah.
I think I'm fucked.
He mimed it.
Okay.
But the Kurgan doesn't get to behead McLeod at this point, and McLeod is left for dead. He basically knocks his dick in the dirt and leaves him there. And he gets taken home and tended to by Kate, who may or may not be a chicken. The book's not clear on this point. And nobody expects him to survive the night.
Yeah, because Kate's there pecking him.
That's right. Yeah, talk about a henpecked husband. Whoa. So that's exactly what I'm talking about. I think there might be foul play. So we go back to 1985, and McLeod is arrested. And we cross instead to forensic expert Brenda Wyatt. So is she hot?
While the guys at the precinct appreciated her looks, they tended to be a little offhand about her position as their forensic expert, and she found her attractiveness more of a hindrance than a benefit.
It is a cross to bear, isn't it? You know, you're there in the office with all these guys, and they're like, yo, I got a DNA sample for you, Brenda. One in a test tube or all over your chest. Am I right? You know, these guys...
I mean, it's so hard being hot in the 80s, you know? Like, you have to spend all that time on your hair and making it as high as possible.
Feathering it? I bet Kate had feathered hair.
Oh, I would imagine so.
Yeah. So not a lot of padding in this book. That's what novelizations get the most shit for. We give them a lot of shit for giving us information about side characters that we don't need to know. However, I felt that if there was padding in this book, it was starting to seep through a little bit here.
Lieutenant Frank Moran was standing near a pillar rubbing his stomach. His ulcer is bothering him again, thought Brenda. Once an ulcer caught hold of a cop, it was difficult to tear it loose. The life was one of irregular meals and fast foods. She knew he tried to stick to a diet, but the job was against him. Then
there's a few pages of his diet plan. There's some illustrations of the workout. He's got a meal plan.
It was a chart charting his shits and how his diet was affecting that.
Yeah. There was one of those stool size charts. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I also thought that the author gave us a bit of Peter David style, where the character's inner monologue critiques the script. Brenda said, "Holy shit," and then she could have bitten off her tongue. She hated reacting like a layperson in front of her colleagues. I like it. They're not allowed, they have to stick to the script, but they're allowed to delve into the character's thoughts, so sometimes they'll kind of criticize the script if it's veering into a way that, isn't how they envision the character. And she finds a sword. I think it's actually a facile sword. It's a very rare sword. And she holds the sword aloft, and she becomes Brenda Highlander, the true star of this series. And I have seen all the Brenda Highlander movies. She's my favourite character.
Yeah, it was such a great bait and switch, wasn't it, really? The trailer told us it was going to be a dude in a awful raincoat, and all the time, Brenda Highlander.
Love Brenda Highlander. I remember reading comic series Dark Horse Presents Brenda Highlander versus Steve Terminator. And it was just fantastic.
I mean, it's a classic now. You wouldn't be able to get hold of it now. It would be like getting a hold of Action Comics 1, surely.
Yeah, but you cut off a Terminator's head, and it's not as simple as you might think, because they're robots, so they're fine with it. So you can imagine all the misunderstandings and things that happen there. At the police station, some more exciting things are happening.
Moran paced the room in front of the desk. There was a sharp pain in his gut, and he wondered whether to send out for a glass of milk, but decided against it. He was not in the mood for taking the jibes that went with such a request. His wife, Alice, had nagged him to eat something before he went out on the call, but as usual, he'd ignored her.
I like that, because you picture these police station scenes, a lot of people wandering around, and I think, take us inside the guts. Of some of these characters.
Yeah, I want to know if this guy's having a problem with gas. I need to know that.
I want to look at a lineup of characters, and I want to be like, okay, who's been eating properly? What was the last thing you had to eat? What does your wife think about it? That's my curiosity as an adult when I watch a fantasy story about Highlanders.
Yeah, I think it's important that we have gritty realism, and part of gritty realism really is bowel movements.
Yes, and
I mean that's what Batman movies are missing, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Why don't you that would humanize him? In my opinion, and also,
does he have a bat flap at the back of the suit? Does he have to take the entire suit off to shit? What's happening there?
If Christopher Nolan is willing to show him, buying all his suit on eBay and, making each individual Batarang, then why not show that? Because as an adult in these gritty reboots, I want to know that it all works. And as an adult as well, watching a fantasy film, I'm very, I enjoy pointing out to my friends all plot holes and things that wouldn't work in the real world. So, how Batman or Superman or anyone, or Highlanders, anyone takes shit, is quite high on that list. And, it wouldn't be the first time that I've, stood up in a cinema and just started lecturing people about that.
Well, I just feel like I can't relate to a character that doesn't poo, Yeah,
and if you do have access to one, take a laser pointer into the cinema, and you can sort of on the screen point out areas in the costume which are either problematic or would allow it to happen. I think the superhero out of all of them that has this is interesting. I think Ant-Man's got it pretty easy.
Okay.
Shrink to tiny size, hide behind a pebble, knock out a couple of pebbles, go back to human size. It's cheating.
Yeah, that seems fine. I also think, Wonder Woman, there's not a lot of coverage there, so she's got it pretty easy too.
Yeah, I guess so. I guess, easy access, but, I don't know.
Oh, no, I forgot. Women don't poop.
There's also that danger of, she could be out there fighting in a costume and have a bit of, toilet paper, hanging out the side. You know what I mean? But then, you think, I reckon the Fantastic Four, on average, have it covered. I don't know about the Thing. I feel he can just compact it all up and it becomes part of him anyway. But Johnny's would just burn up instantly. Sue could do invisible ones.
Yes.
And Reed would just, he could be talking to you in one room while he's shitting in another. So, fantastic. That truly is fantastic. I don't think this was the tangent that we needed to go on. It doesn't appear in our notes, but there you go. So,
any excuse to talk about poo.
Yeah, remember this was the 80s. And I was really surprised, and I shouldn't be, because there were a lot of crossovers and mashups and things, but Garfield turns up in this scene, and he's not really the Garfield that I remember.
Oh, I don't want to read this one.
Okay,
This is a bad word.
All right. Garfield had obviously decided it was time for a jibe. "You a faggot, Nash?" he sneered. Nash turned and smiled at the officer. "Why, you cruising for a piece of ass?" Garfield went crimson and Moran saw his fingers bunch into a fist. The officer stepped forward, then hesitated before saying, "I'll tell you what happened. You went down to the garage for a blowjob and just didn't want to pay for it." So, Garfield hated Mondays and gay people.
Garfield.
Such a sobering reminder, isn't it, when you watch a movie from the 80s?
Yeah, this scene was a bit, oh, he said what?
Yeah.
And but yeah, it would have been just so normalized and not a big deal, but just this whole, and they beat him up because they're just like, "Are you gay?" And and
it's
like,
a horrible jolt because it's just this sort of like I don't think there's anything massively objectionable at all before that, and then suddenly, oh. Anyway, McLeod goes to get his own sword back from the car park and sees Brenda in there forensicing, so he hides and watches her. But it turns out there is a second sinister villain to contend with.
As she prepared to leave, McLeod crept around the base of the pillar and something crunched beneath his foot. He cursed silently. A Coke can. Probably the same one he'd trodden on the evening before. What the hell was it doing? Following him around?
This is sinister. And I think it requires further examination.
Yeah, well, I mean, I was sitting here last night watching the film with a Coke can, and it made me look at the Coke can and think, oh, God, are you spying on me?
Yeah.
Am I going to find you, in my bedroom tomorrow morning just watching me?
Just the logo, just watching you from the dresser.
Yeah.
Wanting to entangle you with its trademarked ribbon device.
Absolutely. Yeah, thankfully, it was in the bin where I left it, but, it could have been a danger. Could have been a danger.
Take care out there, listeners. And McLeod starts to stalk her.
Because that's really romantic.
Yeah.
That evening, McLeod returned to where she lived, intending to knock on her door with the excuse of mistaking her apartment for someone else's. But as he approached the entrance hall, she was just coming out. She looked very attractive, but he tried not to let that bother him.
Oh, that's fantastic that he was able to keep his male animalistic urges at bay a little bit longer. So yes, don't forget there were two villains here. There was the Coke can, but there was also the Kurgan. It was night. The Kurgan was cruising in his car through the sleazy New York areas. He liked the scene out there. The pimps, whores, petty criminals, are lost people. So look, once again, New York really does live up to its label as the greatest city in the world. It's always so attractive in film.
The best dumpster people in the whole damn country.
I know, they're so lucky. If you can make it there, anywhere.
Oh, I'm doing this one, sorry. The pusher screamed, "You fucker!" He kicked the car door savagely and poured out more obscenities. The Kurgan reached through the open window and swallowed the man's face with his huge hand, throwing him backwards at the feet of the hooker who had first approached him. "Go play hopscotch," grinned the Kurgan and roared away from the curb.
That's a pretty sick burn, Kurgan. And that's what I like about Kurgan. He's almost like got the comedy of like Biff's son in the future, but he's just this horrible murdering beast of a man. But yes, certainly has a way with words, as seen in this follow-up scene as well.
The Kurgan watched her dispassionately. "Okay," she shrugged. "What?" He slapped the bed. "Poontang time, baby. Spread 'em."
Hey kids, what time is it? That's my Highlander t-shirt right there. So
Good Lord.
yeah, and shit, it really does get dark. Why did a few minutes with a woman trigger those deeper inner feelings which had no name and which were the only things he feared on the whole earth? They were like black ravenous birds within him, carrion crows, eating outwards from that pitch-dense void that ordinary men would call their soul. "Do you have any tissues?" the gum-chewing mouth asked him. "Use that rag they call a towel, then get dressed and get out."
Oh, damn.
They're not the most romantic people, the Kurgans. But what about that description of his like inner being? It's so funny because I don't feel like the author dwells too much on that, but it's sort of almost like he opens this door and you kind of peer in at the Kurgan for a bit, and then you're like, nope, and then you close the door again, sort of like Dana with the fridge. All right, so MacLeod has a scuffle with the Kurgan. He has an encounter with Brenda. But then we go back to 1536, where miraculously MacLeod has woken up alive. He's vibrant. He has miraculously cheated death overnight. It isn't a miracle. It's an act of God. This is fantastic. So naturally...
Father Rainey had come to the table now and stood beside Kate, who hadn't moved since Connor had entered. Her face had twisted into a mask of loathing. His own sweet Kate was full of hate for him. She said, "It's not natural." She touched his arm tentatively. "He's in league with Lucifer."
Whoa, yeah, that's quite a turn, isn't it? And
yeah.
If you got your drawing pad out, put a mask of loathing on that chicken face.
Yeah, so sweet chicken Kate is just not a fan of Connor anymore.
No, he has the devil in him. I mean, apart from that, they seem like pretty good Christian folks. He was dimly aware of people coming from their huts, the women and children, all come out to stare at the man with the devil in his soul. They handled him roughly, strapping something to his shoulders so he could not move his arms. When he came round fully, he realised it was a yoke. He looked up to see Kate standing over him. Her face still wore that ugly mask. She kicked him hard in the ribs. "Kill him," she shrieked.
Well, I mean, they think it was kill him. It was more like...
Yes. Well,
yeah.
No marriage counsellors in Glenfinnan in 1536. And even if there was someone in the community that was good at sort of mediating marital disputes, it's made so much harder when your wife is a chicken.
Yeah, absolutely.
A lot of people won't even take that on. So he's exiled, but he soon shacks up with a lass, the book's term, not mine, called Heather, and becomes a blacksmith, and some other shit happens. And Heather and Connor MacLeod seem to get along pretty well.
She laughed and kissed him. They began to move, rubbing against each other through their clothes. Heather began to breathe heavily. "You can do that to me forever if you like, my lord."
Wow, so everything's coming up Connor. And then it all goes south when a stranger shows up. And if you've not expecting it or you've kind of forgotten it and you're watching this movie, it's like, oh, here we go. Hello.
I knew this person was in it, but I didn't know what they were doing in it. And
I don't think
a little bit
this
of a shock.
person knew what they were doing in it. "Hello," said the stranger brightly. They stared at him in amazement. He had on a wide-brimmed hat with a high plume that waved gently in the breeze. Over his shoulders was a cloak of peacock's feathers, the colours of which flashed in the morning sunlight. A scarlet waistcoat, black satin breeks, and high leather boots completed his attire. In the broad belt was a short sword, the like of which Connor had never seen before. It had a white ornate hilt, a third the length of the blade. "Greetings," cried the rider, and swept his hat off to Heather in a gallant flourish. "I am Juan Sanchez Villalobos Ramirez, chief metallurgist to King Charles V of Spain. It is Sean fucking Connery, and he brings with him exposition. Shit tons of exposition."
And so he turns up, right, with his full Sean Connery Scottish accent, called Juan Sanchez Villalobos Ramirez. And so Connor's like, "Oh, okay, so you're Spanish." And he's like, "No, dickhead, I'm not Spanish. I'm fucking Egyptian, obviously." And Connor's like, "Oh, well, fuck. I don't even know, dude. Like, I don't even know what's happening here." And all the audience was like that too.
Isn't this Sean Connery the guy that turned down Gandalf because he didn't understand what was going on? And here he is. And look, to be honest, when I'm looking at this sequence in the book, I did not know how to even approach this on the show. Like, all this gubbins. Because it's so much dialogue, so much exposition, so many things, like, thanks to our smart work at the beginning, we already know about the Immortals and the Quickenings, and he just sort of teases this stuff out over many, many pages. And all these, like, McLeod gets struck by lightning, he makes him swim like a fish underwater, he teaches him swordplay, lets him know about the Quickening, the Gathering, this mysterious prize. So, we know all this. And he also puts in this kind of, somewhat like a Jedi training thing, really, and talks about that sort of no attachments thing here as well. Like, Immortals cannot have kids, and they shouldn't hook up with people, because eventually they're going to get old.
She will suffer anyway. You will stay young and she will grow old. Do you want to live with a grandmother? Do you think she'll like that? When the wrinkles cover her face and yours are still smooth and youthful, she may hate you. Have you thought of that?
Yeah, that sounds totally gross. You're right. Mm-hmm. Who'd want to grow old with anybody? And then the Kurgan ends up coming in and busting up all their fun.
Kurgan, said Ramirez almost matter-of-factly. I should have trusted my instincts, or should I say, my sense of smell. The Kurgan laughed. Always the slick-tongued insult, eh, Ramirez? Perhaps I should cut that tongue away from your body, from the neck up.
Okay, so it was no go play hopscotch, but still, give him a chance.
Well, it might not have been invented at that point. It may have been, a concept that he's learnt over the last kind of 500 years.
How do you think the Kurgan learnt about hopscotch? I think that's a story worth telling. Can you picture him playing it?
Well, I can't imagine he was playing it. Like, maybe he saw some children playing hopscotch.
And ate them?
Thought they seemed too happy. And then he cut their heads off.
Just ate their legs.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I guess Sean Connery being in this was a big deal, and he's about to exit it in this next paragraph, so we didn't spend much time with him on this particular show. But I guess, really, when you think about this film and how it, like, Connery's involvement's really the only thing stopping it from being just this forgettable, low-budget looking, I don't know. I mean, I guess, like, Connery plus the fact that you've got Queen, they're the things that elevate it. Beyond being something like a little more schlocky. But not a happy ending for Connery here. Tonight you sleep in hell, said the Kurgan. There can be only one. The sword flashed again and something fell beside Heather. At first she thought it was another stone with a grass clump growing from it. And then she saw the eyes staring at her blindly and screamed. It was the head of Ramirez. His hair was black against the snow that had covered the floor in a thin layer, and the stump of the neck was still twitching. She vomited violently. And I'm sorry to say that the one thing that stops the Kurgan from being a fun, lovable character is what he does to her afterwards. There is something that earns a ticker warning, and it's actually described in too much detail in the book. So,
really?
Yeah, so I'm not going...
They pass over it very much in the movie.
No, the film gets into the actual sequence, and I thought, like, nothing brings down a show quicker than that, so let's move on. The Kurgan gets away, and time passes, a whole lot of time.
One day, when her hair had turned white and her face had begun to crease into a leathery appearance, he found her lying by the milk bucket in the stall. He carried her frail body into the croft and laid it on the bed he had fashioned for them both with his own hands.
He would later fashion her leathery face into a fashionable wallet. Which is a great way to remember Heather.
Yeah, it's a little custom sporran for his kilt.
Yes, he had it embossed with Bad Mother Heather. So he lost the love of his life. But he, by the time you sort of get to 85, he's got this relationship kind of with this lady called Rachel. And I guess what they have like joint custodianship of Nash Antiques. And here's the thing about Rachel.
The woman was quite attractive for someone in her 40s, and Brenda felt an unreasonable flash of pique go through her. Was this woman personally involved with Nash?
Quite attractive for someone in her 40s. That's
She wasn't 40 in the movie. She was older than that.
Yeah.
Or was she like 80s 40?
Yeah, I guess. Because what we find out is he met her when she was a girl. There's all these flashbacks to different time periods. And she was a girl getting attacked by Nazis, and he saved her. So that's a thing about this book and film. It just has too much of everything. And it was certainly this point reading it where I was just like, okay, I'm getting a bit exhausted by it now. All these jumps back and forward. I kind of wanted to start speeding up the pace a bit. And speaking of loading the story up, we're now introduced to yet another character, which is Castigier, who is, his words, black gentleman who is a sword-wielding immortal in traditional African dress. And he is played by Captain Panaka from The Phantom Menace.
Yeah, right. There you go. He's just going from hit to hit to hit.
That's true.
Oh, by the way, I bought you some of this, said Castigier. He reached inside his caftan and brought out a bottle.
What's that? asked McLeod. I was just helping you out.
Okay, cool. We're doubling it up. I go, boom, boom.
McLeod shook his head. Now we're in sync. Castigier seemed disappointed.
A big, strong man like you shouldn't be afraid of a little boom, boom.
But McLeod knew well that anything given him by Castigier had to be taken in the knowledge that there was more behind it than just a drink. It could be a practical joke. So yes, I have zero idea what is going on at the moment with the boom boom. I guess that's what you drink before you go back to my room, right?
According to the Venga Boys, yeah, absolutely. That's definitely what you want to do. But yeah, they just kind of meet on a bridge and they have a drink and then they don't kind of hang out again at all.
In the book, they are on a subway train. That's not in the film, is it?
This happens on some bridge.
Yeah, no, they go to a bridge afterwards, but they see each other first on a subway train, and there's two rival gangs, and they pull out their swords and scare them away.
Oh, yeah, no.
And author Gary here seems sort of over-obsessed with blackness as well, and this is one of those things which we've talked about in previous episodes, where you sort of go, all right, the author's introducing a character who's not a white guy, which is rare, and are they going to call it out? Are they going to mention it? And he just calls it out constantly. There's the black face creased into a grin, and McLeod looked at the black man. Tough guy, said the old black. It just continually reminds you. And
that's some very stark writing there.
Yeah, not something that happens too regularly now. But don't get too attached to Castigier or too attached to his head and his neck, because he is beheaded by the Kurgan. So now there is just all that's left, the gathering-wise, is the showdown between McLeod and the Kurgan. So let us just get there. They meet in a church, and here's something I've just put in as a little bit of colour, because this is why the Kurgan is pretty great.
Two nuns passed by in the aisle and glanced nervously at the Kurgan. His whole presence was a threat to the peace in the church. He seemed to radiate a kind of black light that filled the atmosphere with foreboding. It was not just the way he was dressed, it was his demeanour, his stance, his arrogant expression. He did not have to say anything, he just had to be there. Worshippers nearby were aware of something spiritually ugly in the church. The Kurgan called after the nuns, "Happy Halloween, ladies!" The two sisters crossed themselves and took a pew in front of the altar. "Nuns," sneered the Kurgan. No sense of humour.
Yeah, I love the Kurgan. He's pretty great. And God,
and like, they're in the church because they've I think they've set up a little bit earlier that they can't fight on like holy ground or something.
And it's so funny, like we had that weird tangent before, but here we have two nuns that took a pew in front of the altar. So the Kurgan ends up kidnapping Brenda, and the final battle takes place, according to the book, at the Silver Cup Bakery.
Oh, bakery.
So you can imagine it, there's like, they're getting covered in flour, there's some Kurgan cream pie fighting happening. Mm-hmm. Cream pies, finger buns. It's sounding like something else now. But there's a huge fight, lightning swords, neon, and then finally...
Bright samurai blade flashed out. The tight grain of the wakizashi sword with its undulating temper line impacted with flesh. It sliced through the soft tissue of the Kurgan's throat. The Kurgan looked surprised. For one moment, McLeod was not sure that the cut had been deep enough, and then the head lolled backwards.
I've got $100 million merchandising idea here. Highlander Pez dispensers. It's brilliant.
Yeah, we don't really want to eat out of the Kurgan's neck, do you?
Well, I'd like one on my shelf.
Okay.
So Kurgan's dead. He was the last one. There can be only one. That is Connor McLeod, and he gets zapped by a whole lot of energy. There is a mega quickening. It all goes into him. He's all quickened up. And that means that, as we reach the end here, that Connor has won the prize. So the question later comes up with Brenda. He's sitting outside with Brenda, just, patting himself on the back for a job well done. And she asks point blank, what is this prize?
Prize, said Brenda, interrupting his thoughts. You know what it is? Yes, but I cannot explain it to you. It has no name. It's something that I feel. I'm changed. I've never felt so alive, so complete. I'm not as I was before, but I can't explain what I am now. You'll just have to see how I cope with this change. If you stay with me, that is.
And that's all that we know about the prize, according to the book.
That's not an answer.
That's pretty vague. And it's funny because there was a review that I read, and I haven't excerpted this review, but they said the author was too lazy to even explain the prize. And I doubt that very much, that they decided at the end, oh, fuck it, I won't even say what it is. I would say it's more likely that the original screenplay kept it vague, and then people went, that's kind of a cop-out bullshit thing. Which is why the actual explanation of the prize that appears in the film is so fucking shoehorned in. Like, do you remember what it was? It's like he can...
It's that he can, if he concentrates, he can read anyone's mind anywhere in the world or something?
Yeah, like the thoughts and feelings of world leaders and things like that. And you just think, God, pick the cruise. Get the washer-dryer combo. Get something practical. Because, I mean, this was before Twitter. Like, I've just got in this other window, I can read Donald Trump's mind right now. View 2 new tweets.
Yeah, you don't need to know you don't need a direct tap into the brain of Donald Trump.
Yeah. It's all out there. I'm sorry, I was just reading what they actually said to see if it was worth quoting, but it just made me sad. So, I'm going to read the ending. This is the ending we've gotten there. On one occasion, he had to go to Scotland on business and stopped off at a small village in the southern uplands. From there, he climbed up, taking a mountain path to a shelf overlooking the valley. There was no croft there now, but he found some of the stones from the old tower and the spot where they were buried. You would like her, Heather, he said. I know you would. She is much like you. He said nothing more. Instead, he found 2 old timbers and built a rough cross, laying it over the place where his friend Ramirez and his wife, Heather, was resting together. He stayed there until nightfall, in the company of distant loved ones, comfortable with the ghosts of a different life.
There you go.
And of course, Connery was back for the sequel, so there can be only one my ass.
Well, I guess Connery can, do what he wants, right?
Yeah.
You can just go, fuck it.
Yeah, I think it opens with him just, waking up from a dream. And going, oh, I dreamt all that. I must have
he just goes, well, you know what, my life force is in this other dude, so I'm just going to, Doctor Who regenerate into my own self. Because I'm Sean Connery, much more pimp than the other guy.
Well, look, there might be a Highlander 2 novelisation. There probably is. So maybe just in the same way that we've documented the adventures of Steve Terminator, maybe we'll have to revisit Highlander at some point in the future. But that is the end. And there can only be one decision when you have to choose, was the book better?
Oh, God, the book was so much better.
I think just that bit with the horse and the rider was just so good that, I've got to go for the book as well. I think it just makes everything a lot gnarlier. I do enjoy Clancy Brown's performance. I think that's a highlight. But otherwise, Lambert himself is just doing nothing. And, Connery's a bit of fun, but he is an exposition machine. He's just
yeah, absolutely.
Get in, get out. So, I'm going to go with the book as well. So there you go. So suck it, movie.
Yeah. Fuck you, movie. And I'd put on Twitter that I was watching Highlander and a friend went, whoa, wait till you get to Highlander 2. And I'm like, I am not doing Highlander 2. Like, in 1,000,000 years, I'm not watching Highlander 2, The Quickening.
You will when we read the book.
No!
So I did go onto Amazon, and there are a few reviews, mostly pretty coherent, and people love Highlander. They love the series, and the reviews, I said this was, one of the better written novelizations, and a lot of the time you read shitty novelizations and people on Amazon are like, oh, I thought it was brilliant. It was the best book I've ever read. And this was sort of the opposite. I thought this was well written, but everyone was like, oh, you guys dropped the ball, Gary, you dickhead. And here's the sort of example. This guy's called the Rectifier.
The rectum fire.
And he's got a fire in his rectum, and he gave it 2 out of 5 stars. This is just a little example of what he didn't like about it. Since the current weapon of Connor MacLeod is a katana, you would think that the authors might have used the word once in the book. The second time I saw samurai sword, I knew I should have just watched the movie again. Fun guy to be around, the Rectifier.
I can picture this guy in my head. Like, he's a white, late 30s neckbeard who is the sort of dude that has katanas hanging on his wall in one of those little racks.
His eyes rolled so hard and suddenly that he had to have a lie down for a while.
Yeah, he could see the inside of his fedora. His eyes were just that far back in his head. Yeah,
he was disgusted with this book, and fair enough. Let's hold ourselves to higher standards. So, holy fuck, there you go. Anything else about Highlander that movie or book that we didn't cover?
No, there's like a bit at the bit at the end where he's with her in Scotland or whatever and sitting on the little, grassy knoll. Is he, like, not immortal now? Is that part of the prize? Oh,
yeah. No, that's true. That is part of the prize. And that's not mentioned in the book.
Ah.
But, or is it? But yeah, that's part of the prize, is that you're no longer immortal. Or, like, you can have kids and get old.
Yeah.
Which is why the mind-reading thing is wearing a hat. Because you would think the prize would be, you've come this far and guess what? Now you can live a normal life. But instead it's like, and you can read people's minds.
Yeah, and it's meant to be like, I don't know, something that he's meant to be able to use for good or whatever, right? But now he's only going to be able to use it for good for like another 50 years or whatever.
And I just don't know how he would use that information either.
No.
Like I said, I just read something stupid the president was thinking. I'm like, what can I do about it?
Yeah. It's almost like this Highlander movie wasn't even trying. They just went, you know what, let's have like a movie with swords, and then they just expanded on that idea.
I think you're right. You're starting to break up a little bit, so maybe this is the time that we part. But thanks everyone for listening. Next week on Book Was Better, now this is interesting. Paris will be the guest host, and we are doing a book which is got quite a provocative title considering. It's called Rugrats in Paris. And I want to get to the bottom of this. I want to no judgment. I just want to find out what went on. So we'll be doing that, and you can find out everything that we're doing, including the show I do with Jacinta here, the weekly pop culture news and review show, FP Cast, all of that. It's at fruitlesspursuits.com. Links to our Facebook discussion group, iTunes, Patreon, all that business. And that's it. We've done the show. So,
all done.
Yeah. So if you want to say the thing that you never remember, we can get out of here. But we cannot get out of here until you remember it and say it correctly.
Catch you on the flip.
Jumanji.